Good morning, Cedarfield. Welcome to our program of the Focus Group. Today, I am honored to bring to you a native Richmonder, Danita Roundtree Green. She's getting a lot of applause and a lot of waves here in our audience. She is a graduate of the University of Virginia and the University of Maryland. She considers herself over 25 years a wordsmith, a storyteller, author, playwright, now becoming a filmmaker, a trauma healer, and here in Richmond, the co-founder and co-CEO of Coming to the Table, RVA. Also in Richmond, she serves as Vice Chair of the Richmond Public Library Board of Directors and as an arts specialist for the City of Richmond, creating therapeutic communities and programming to serve in our ever-changing, diverse community. As an entrepreneur, she is the CEO of a small press dedicated to telling the common stories in an uncommon way. In her own words, she states, "Language leads change and creates the narrative of our personal histories and the legacies that we leave for the next generation. I believe that we live in a story that is inclusive and embraces, respects, and acknowledges the lives of others. And then we lead more fruitful lives ourselves." Danita Roundtree Green today will speak about a specific community here in Richmond, communities that are forming intentionally to be inclusive. Danita, welcome to Cedarfield.
Good morning, and thank you, Barbara. That was beautiful. I was like, gosh, it made me sound so important. But thank you so much for having me today. This is a beautiful facility and a gorgeous day, so I'm hoping that afterwards I'll be able to walk around a little bit and see more of it. Yes, I am retirement planning, so, but this is an awesome place to be, I can already tell. Well, good morning. And now I'm going to do two things. We're going to talk about Coming to the Table and the phenomenal work that this organization does. And want to also give you an opportunity to talk to me about your lives, because a lot of what Barbara read about me boils down to one thing. I'm a storyteller and I am a story gatherer. I am really excited when I meet new people and they are able to share their stories with me, particularly if I can hear the differences in people's experiences. But I get more excited when I meet people who may not look like me, may not come from where I come from. Maybe they don't shop at the same store or went to the same school. But I'm always very excited when we can find commonalities in folks where sometimes we don't always believe that we will. Okay? So I'm going to take a sip of this water first, and if you have yours, I suggest you do the same. And I'm a little unorthodox. I don't use slides. I speak most from my heart, and as a storyteller, I talk about my experience. So the first thing I'll do is ask you all for a moment to close your eyes in sort of a centering moment, but to be willing to journey with me backwards into the place in your life where you were 10 years younger, or maybe 20 years younger, or 40 years in the past, when parents were still here, and your first really close best friends, when siblings were close, a time when you can possibly remember your teachers in high school and further back in middle school. If you can think back a little bit farther to elementary school, think about what you wore. Think about the smiles that greeted you in the morning, the frowns from, parents who are trying to teach you right from wrong. Think about the days when you got it just right in that paper that you gave to your teacher. And even be bold enough to think about moments when you may have gotten it all wrong on that report card. Remember when kids used to get report cards, for real? And parents had to sign them. Think about those days. Think for a second about that ride to school, or that walk to school, or for some of you, maybe even that nanny or that person that helped you get there, or that person who came to you with learning to help you grow. Think of how life felt in those moments, at that time. Remember if you felt safe. And now think of maybe a time when you felt sort of unsure. Maybe your first day at something, or your first try at something. Remember those times and those people that helped you through that. And now think of a time when your world expanded, larger than the world of family, larger than the world of parents. Think of when your world expanded to realize that there were people that were other than you, or as we say, different from you. When you realized that everyone was not like your family, or maybe not even like your close friends. Think of when you realized that there were people that were distant from you in some ways, even if you could not voice them, you had no words for that. Just feel that experience. Usually it happens in school, but not always. Think of that person or those people who became the other for you. Or think about when you realized that you were the other to other people. You were the one that was different. It could have been the way you walked, the way you talked, what you said, how you smiled, or it could have been how you looked. what kind of hair you had, what color were your eyes, what you wore, your mannerisms, the things that made you different. Just sit with that for a moment. Think about what you may have said at that moment, how you may have acted, how someone acted toward you, or maybe you saw an instant when someone else was being othered, someone else was being pointed out, something else was happening, but how did you feel at that moment? Sit with that right now. Breathe in your reactions. Were they reactions that you were proud of at that moment? Or maybe not so proud? It doesn't really matter. Because this is the moment, as in each and every moment, that you can make a different decision to respond a different way that is more serving of the person you are right now. Thank you for that moment. Okay, if we can come back. And I'm thinking that probably everybody in this room, including myself, is holding a vision or a story or a narrative of a certain time. If you're holding a story, you don't have to tell me what it is. If you're holding an image in your head, raise your hand. Okay. How many of you all are holding a vision in your head of yourself as a teenager? Okay, all right, it's 2 or 3. How many of you are holding an image in your head of meeting another, someone very different, and realizing they're different, and you are probably much younger, under the age of 12, under the age of 11, okay, all right. Because most experiences that stay with us the longest are those that happen very early on in life, those memories that help us to decide who we are and how we're going to respond, and the behavior patterns that we take into adulthood and keep for the rest of our lives start right there between age of birth and 10 years old. In coming to the table, most of the work that we do is just about that. We look at what people call now clinically childhood trauma, but we look at what patterns in our lives or what behaviors in our lives were seeded in us very young. And usually, one that is hardest to change and hardest to break is when we start to identify ourselves differently in one way or another from other people. If we identify as being less than for some reason, if someone has othered us and makes us feel bad, it takes us a long time to move out of that way of thinking, being, and doing. And by the same token, if we are othered and that othering makes us feel good and the other person feeling less than, there's a possibility that we can hold that in a space that also comes with fear, anxiety, and stress. All of these things are at the basis of our racist tendencies that stay with us for a very long time. In coming to the table, first of all, let me tell you a few things about coming to the table. The Richmond chapter of Coming to the Table, RVA, is about 14 years old. Eddie, I think let me see where this is going to go. Fabulous. We're good. We got established in Richmond, Virginia in 2014. We are one of 56 chapters all over the nation, and frankly, there were only about 18 chapters before the pandemic broke out. But we went right from our health crisis in our country to a race crisis in our country with the dawning of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter taking the lead in scratching the scalp, as my mother would say, of some dandruff that had to fall out. We went from being the largest chapter to the chapter that outgrew our national. We have over 4,000 participants now with the power of Zoom in coming to the table. And all of these people come to us for educational purposes, to find out about why we have so many problems in the United States when it comes to race. Why do we have these issues that still persist here in the former capital of the Confederacy? So we do education, we talk about housing, we talk about systemic racism, but most of what we do is to help people to come together to build relationships across the racial divide. And that can only happen if we are willing to look at, honestly and sincerely, our relationship with enslavement. This is a history that we really don't deal with anywhere in our elementary schools, our high schools. And as I said before, our ways of thinking, being, and doing that we cultivate as very young people, they don't go away. They stay with us until we get learning, knowledge, examples that confront what we were taught as children. So how do we do this? We do everything across the racial divide, first of all. I am a co-founder of Coming to the Table RVA, and I founded it with Martha Rollins, beautiful woman who has become a very good friend of mine over the years. We met about 11 or 12 years ago and decided then that we were going to look for a model that could help our city, whom we both love, to move forward beyond the legacy of enslavement. Many of you may know Martha Rollins. She's a beautiful lady. She founded Boaz and Ruth maybe about 16, 17 years ago now. It's a thriving business, and she's retired from it. But that's how we met. She was being honored at a function, and I had written my third book on prison culture. More so writing not so much about the folks who are locked up on the inside. I was writing about people who are locked up on the outside, and how both communities were affected. Families losing key members of those families and not getting the assistance that they needed. So anyway, in the Martha Rollins way that she is, she came up to me and she said, "Oh, you're brilliant. I'm going to see the president and tomorrow, and I'm having lunch with the first lady." This is real. I'm telling you a true story here. She said, "Would you like to go?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be kind of nice." But of course, she couldn't get me clearance to go that quickly, but it was the beginning of a wonderful friendship. And she has, like I said, she's retired, but we have continued the co-CEO, the co-leadership model. So Marcia Summers is my co-CEO now. And we have a staff of maybe about 10 people who make this thing happen every day. We went from having 26 events a year, which all seems like a lot. That would include our book circles and book clubs, our reparations circle, We have a RAW circle, which RAW stands for Racism at Work. We have a tour group, we do pilgrimages, we do all of those things. So we would get together 26 times a year to do something. So of course that was at least twice a month. Now we have 70 events a year that are public. We do that much programming. And of course we do most of that over a virtual format, which has given us the opportunity to move through the Richmond area, but through the state, but also nationally, and I speak globally. I spoke to a group in Palestinians that were actually in Palestine over media. They too working on ethnic situations and also gender problems that actually mirror the race problem that we have in other places. So it's been a wild ride, but here we are together now, and these are the things that we stand on. How do we do this work? So how do you change 150 years plus of difficult ways of thinking, being, and doing when it comes to race? Well, the first one is truth-telling in history. We all had history books when we were coming up in school. Some of them had references on race and people of color, but most of them didn't. I know the ones that I had did not. So there's an indication to me, and should be to you, that there's part of our history that's sorely missing in our school systems. So truth-telling in history is one. So we go out of our way to bring people to the table to help us understand things, the other side of that story. Then after we learn something from a book, or we learn it from a movie or a speaker, then we do the very important work. When we met in person, we met at Gennett Park Presbyterian Church in their fellowship hall, and we would have 100 tables set out, 10 tables set out with 100 people in the room, and we would have 10 people at each table, and we would talk about what we saw together. And that was so amazing, because two people can see the same thing and not get the same thing out of it. It doesn't bring up the same memories. So when we talk about housing in Richmond, somebody may think of a Windsor Farms, or a Westover Hills, which is another beautiful community. Somebody like me who grew up in Eastern Henrico, that used to be a part of the city of Richmond, talked about redlining, because I was a very little girl, but I remember when our street was divided in half. I remember that when the interstate was put up. That's what redlining is. That separated me from my church. It separated me from the high school I thought I was going to go to. It separated me from half of my friends. It separated me from the African American businesses that were owned, that were part of the city of Richmond, and now we weren't that anymore. So we look at the history together. I hear a portion of it from somebody who maybe is the other from me, doesn't look like me, and then they hear my story, and then together we have the what? We have the whole story. So when you do that, the next thing that happens is that you make a connection with somebody. You go, oh, wow, really? I thought we had a lot in common, and we do, but we had a really different beginning. Tell me more. And that's the way that you build relationships. We are doing a lot of work now with First Presbyterian Church, with Amy Redwine. I don't know if you're familiar with that church. Beautiful congregation. And this is the first time that I have really been around people that I might other of European American descent that tell me very honestly, and we look for honesty in coming to the table. And I have never had a conversation with an African American that did not include how much gas I wanted in my car, and can you break this $20 and give me my change. That dynamic happens on both sides of the racial divide. So if you can imagine, it's almost as if we are two We're all Americans, but we're living in two different Americas. And we brush against each other, we pass each other on the highways. We may even have a few nice words at the water fountain at work, we may. But quite often, sometimes we don't. So coming to the table is a wonderful opportunity for people to come together and have really deep conversations for the very first time. And for some of these people, it leads to the third element here, what we call leg 3 of our table, and that's healing. Because all of us, well, not all, but most of us, many of us, have detrimental memories when it comes to meeting the other. Meeting that first white person, if I can use that term and not offend. I always ask if I'm using words that offend, I'll apologize. Meeting that first black person, okay? Sometimes those first interactions don't go well. Or worse yet, and this happens so often when we work with college students. I call them kids because I'm old enough to do that. They don't like to be called that because they're adults. But often we work with high schoolers who have just come away from home for the first time. They've come from their all-black community, and now they're like at a VCU, and they're with just like a rainbow tribe of people. Or they're coming from their all-white communities, and they're at VCU or a school such as that for the first time, and they're meeting the other everywhere. Sometimes they're the people that they were taught to fear, and they're in the same classrooms. If they're in the same dorms, they're sharing the same shower, they're like everywhere, and there's a confusion, like, oh, I thought I was supposed to be afraid of that person. I thought I wasn't supposed to like that person, but this person helped me with trigonometry. That one made sure I got to class on time. That one tells the best jokes I've ever heard, and they're becoming my friends. And that's a wonderful thing when that happens. But the next thing that happens is, oh, okay, I like these people. But why did Daddy, or why did Grandma, or why did Great-Grandma, who I love with all my heart, use that word to describe them? Or why did they say this about them? Or why did I hear them say X, Y, and Z in the car at the stoplight when they saw that person that looks like my new friend now? And that whole generation, this generation that we're watching now that is soon going to be taking over the world while we're in places like this, they are experiencing life very differently. And then they have to figure out, how can I still, with what I have learned, how can I still love, honor, and respect that person, that grandparent normally, that has fed me or just left me with ill feelings about that person that they othered who is now my friend. So that's the kind of healing that we're talking about, generational harm, being able to go back and look at those stories. So the fourth leg of the table is taking action. So we are hoping and coming to the table. When you come to any of our events, and when I say come to them, I mean like on your phone, on your cell phones, or on your computers. When you're coming to a coming to the table event, we want you to get some truth-telling in history, learn some things you didn't know. We want you to make some connections in the people in the breakout rooms, since we're in virtual space now. We want you to have that aha moment. Okay, wow, all right, now I understand better. And hopefully you feel better. But even if you don't feel better, we want you to be able to take what you've learned and put it into some kind of action. And we don't even really care what kind of action it is. We want you to be able to take charge of your own story. From that little kid that you were, to that high schooler, to that professional person, to that grandparent, to now. We want you to be able to take that learning, take that connection, Take that feeling of healing. Take that back into your families. Bring that into the fellowship hall. Take that into your churches. Take that into the next relationship that you have so we can move forward in some great social change. Okay, now, that's basically what coming to the table does. Now, the best thing about being me is that I'm able to move literally all over the country and meet people that are doing great things all over America. And even regardless of what political party you belong to, people generally want to be comfortable in the space that they live, in the state that they live. They want to be happy, and generally they want the other people, even those ones that they don't see in other communities, to have that American dream and be itself fulfilled. I would say now is the best time ever to be able to be a part of that America as it's growing. I was telling Barbara that I was able to go to Seattle in November to jury a film on the Caroline community. Any of you guys familiar with the Caroline community? Anybody lived there before? No? Okay. Beautiful community. And they've made a film. They came here a while back and made a film. And the reason why they chose the Caroline is because it's one of the few communities, at least in Virginia, where the residents decided that they wanted to outgrow the legacy of segregation that they were known for. So they intentionally decided to do something about it. So this is the film. In fact, this is not even the last version of this film. It gets better and better and better. But this is the one I have now because we're doing a 3-part series on how do we build better communities. And the series is called Won't You Be My Neighbor? Everybody remember Mr. Rogers? Okay. I saw the documentary on Mr. Rogers, and the song lives in our heads forever, Won't You Be Our Neighbor, right? Okay, I won't sing it for you, I can't sing. But in the documentary, he said, yes, that's a great question, won't you be my neighbor? But what I was really asking is, why aren't you my neighbor? Or why won't you be my neighbor? Or why can't you be my neighbor? Because he was very concerned then, when he was doing that show a million years ago, that our neighborhoods around the country look the way they do for a reason. And he wanted to use his platform to make a difference in that half an hour show, whatever it was, to make us all feel neighborly and embraced. So anyway, I'll stop talking and I'm gonna hit play and something's gonna happen and you'll be able to hear the movie. Network error. Oh. Do I, network player. Oh, internet, okay. So do I need an internet code? Eddie?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have that. Can you help with that? Okay. Oh, we gotta go. Wow, I'm so sorry. We should have thought of that first, that we needed an internet code. So I'll just keep talking for a second. Can you see that? Okay. So this is the book. Like I said, we have not only one book circle, we have 2 book circles. We have one that's called Reading for Change, and the other one is Education for Action. And together we read a book every single month, not all of us, because we realize that some people like to get this knowledge and this learning in large groups, okay? So we have the larger groups, like the third Tuesday tonight, Won't You Be Our Neighbor? There are probably going to be 120 people on that call tonight to hear about that and to hear Marty Wickbright talk about housing enrichment. But we also realize that some people like their learning in smaller doses, in small nuggets. So this is Reading for Change, and this book is Robert E. Lee and me, but we have many books that we use. Let me see if I can get this to change. Who remembers The Defiant Ones? That movie with Sidney Poitier. Thank you! With Sidney Poitier. So we watch new movies, of course, but we watch old standards as well. And this is, of course, a nod to Sidney Poitier, who we recently lost. But that's an opportunity to, what we do is watch a movie together. At least we used to come into an auditorium like this and watch a movie together. Or sometimes we'd have so many people sign up for the movie event that we would rent out the Bird Theater, a theater there, and people would come, and then we would go someplace for dinner, and then at those tables we would discuss what we saw. Okay. And this is the event tonight, Third Tuesday Gathering. Won't You Be My Neighbor? And we have Marty Wetbright is the director of legal aid here in the city. And he's going to talk to us about things like gentrification, okay, white flight, some of the problems with urban planning, and how we can move together in action for change. Yes?
We're going to try something.
Okay. Can I keep talking while you're trying something? Okay. All right. And I don't know about me. It seems like you did everything you were supposed to do. If I can find a technical issue someplace, I'm going to find one. So this was me. I have 5 sons. Believe that? And the one rule that we have in the house that they have for me is mother cannot touch the technology. I just own that because that's just what it is. So, but anyway, I think this is a small thing. It's just we have to get the password and find the internet connection and start from there. I'm connected. Yeah, that's what we want to see. I think it's connected. Oh, okay. I don't know. I feel better when you have 3 people working. It's okay. All right. So I'm going to tell you a secret too about coming to the table. We've had this name, and I mentioned earlier coming to the table RVA because there are other chapters are coming to the table, or CTTT Charlottesville, CTT Petersburg, CTT Northern Virginia, Eastern Shore, Virginia Triangle Chapter, all of those places. Is that it? Okay, great. So we have grown so much that we have outgrown our national, with 4,000 participants and say 500 really active members all the time and a staff. We have to change our name. So yes, because people don't know where to donate money. They don't know the difference between us and the larger entity. So this is one of the last times you'll hear me even say coming to the table in this way. We're going to stay an affiliate, but we are going to become something else. And I have a gag order on me. I can't tell you exactly what it is yet, but we're excited about the change. We're excited that we can take the coming to the table message to a larger scale. And we're even more excited about growing into a place where we can be more seated and working with our 9 other Virginia chapters and working for change across the state. So we're excited about that. All right, we're going to try this again. Okay. Thank you. If you have an account, log in here. I don't have an account. Do you have an account? Don't steal his password. That's a joke. So I want to tell you a little bit about the folks who made this film. That is called Thriving Communities. It's the name of the organization. And these are former, mostly politicians, community leaders from all over the country that meet several times a year at Whidbey Island, at the Whidbey Institute. Phenomenal place. If you haven't been there, it's wonderful. I went at the height of rainy season, which wasn't so great. But these are folks who are dedicated to just tackle and solve so many problems that we have across the nation. And I mean, some of it is food sustainability, some of it's housing, some of it is how we treat the elderly, how we treat veterans, how we treat people who have disabilities. And they're not just simply looking for problems, and that's what some people say, that's what coming to the table does. Thriving community and coming to the table, we look at what the problems are so we can come up with the solutions. And if you have a moment, you go to the Thriving Communities website, and they have a docket of 60 films that they have made over a 10-year period, and all of them are addressing different things. And they release ownership of all of these films to the general public, so there's no licensing involved. So that's why I can come here and I can show this film without having to pay a fee or anything like that. But Thriving Communities, this is something that you can watch all day. Thank you. Is it Mariah?
Yep.
Thank you. So this is something you can watch all day and be able to see wonderful people at work, literally all over the country, doing phenomenal things. So it's an exciting group to be a part of. I know Barbara mentioned that whole list, that litany of things I do. Now I'm on the advisory board for Thriving Communities. We needed something else to do. And they are actually coming here in April to be able to learn more about Richmond and the things that we do. We may not be able to see this today. I think we're running out of time. How are we looking on time?
20 more minutes.
24?
How do you scroll down?
Here?
Yeah, how do you scroll it?
Would you take questions?
I certainly will, right here. Mhm. I can take questions, right here.
Does anybody have any questions? Anything that they would like to say
I
or
can't do it.
ask?
You can't do it? All right, gosh, I'm sorry.
I need to, there's a scroll. Maybe I can do it.
No statements anybody wants to make?
Okay, you hit whichever one of these you need to open.
Yeah, I'm looking for it.
Okay, all right. No questions? About racism? Okay, because that's a whole big area of my expertise. Unless you want to ask about something else too, we can do that. I would really like to show this film though. Network correction error. I'm just not picking up the internet.
Yeah, I don't know.
So why don't I'm sorry. Yes, Charlie.
I wrote an essay a few years ago called "I Went to the Body." I wrote a column in the Times Dispatch a few years ago called "I Was Once Blind," based on, I talked about growing up in a small southern town in which had a relatively small African American community, but that African Americans could not check out books from the public library. There was nobody in local government. And I grew up in this little town, and my memories were very positive in nostalgia. But I read a book by Carl Rollins, who was an ambassador to Denmark. He was African American. He grew up in the same town I did. His memories weren't the same. And it makes me realize that we were blind, we as whites, to the injustices in that community. And that it is something that makes me wonder, what are we blind to today that we do not see and don't do anything about it?
That is beautiful. I'm so glad you shared it because, thank you so much, because so often, I'll have somebody say, gosh, Danita, you really had a hard time coming up or something like that. But the truth is, I had a wonderful childhood. And just about all children, I would think, there were decisions and just things that my parents did that I didn't understand, But sometimes they gave me a reason, and sometimes parents don't give you a reason. My mother was a 5th grade teacher in the city of Richmond, and I was very privileged to go, I think, at least I thought for a long time, I went to the same school where she taught, and afterwards I wish I went to a different school so she wouldn't know everything I did all the time. But this was Carver School in the middle of the city of Richmond on Lee Street. And this was before my mom had a car, and we would walk from that street to Broad Street to get on a bus to go home to Henrico County. So, and I may have been about 5, I remember, about 5 years old. And you guys remember the 2 anchor stores downtown, Miller Roads and Tallheimers, which is where we got to get on the bus. And Miller Roads used to have the most beautiful windows. Oh, they were just beautiful windows. And I remember asking my mother, I was looking in the window and there was a doll. I thought it was the most gorgeous doll I had ever seen. And I wanted to go in the store to see the doll, and she would just say, no, I'm sorry, you can't. And this would have been in the early 60s. And I thought my mother was just mean. I thought she was just being nasty. I thought she just didn't want me to have a doll. But there was a time when Miller Roads did not allow African Americans, black people, on the main floor. There was a time when African Americans shopped in the basement. And my mother, I didn't know that then, but my mother was just determined that she was not going to shop in anybody's basement. And she just took my fury as a little girl, wanted the little white doll that I saw in the window, and yeah. But I had a great childhood, but looking back on it, I'm always thinking what things in my life may have been different. Try it again. Okay. Yeah, if you hit this, I don't know. Okay, freshman, okay. And I got a ton of stories like that. But again, we look at history in coming to the table. Okay. But what we focus on is what we can do as we move forward. How can we change neighborhoods? How can we change systems? How can we change policies? That's what we look for. I think we are there. Mariah and Eddie. So we'll see as much of this as we can, because it really is a beautiful film. It's not responding. Man. How many problems can I possibly have with this today? It's supposed to be right here. Yeah, please.
Across that part of Center Richmond were making regular trips to City Hall to oppose the loss of their homes in their neighborhood to the expressway. It was rare that black people and white people came together to be on the same side of an issue.
The intended purpose of that was that the West End would be divided into 2 neighborhoods. South of the freeway would be a black neighborhood. North of the freeway would be a white neighborhood.
Well, you started looking for a house in 1969, which is right at school, and I found one that I really liked, and the agent said, oh, you don't want to live there, it's a changing neighborhood. I always thought change was good, I didn't know what he meant by that. So we bought the house anyway, and I said, no, I'm not going to let him tell me what's going to happen. I'm going to go out and meet the neighbors.
When I moved to the neighborhood, my wife and I, we made a decision that nobody in our block was not going to know each other.
We were looking for a nice house at a reasonable price, and we had a friend, and he had told us what a nice area it was, and he encouraged us, okay, when you start to look for a house, come over here, come over to the Caroline area. My husband complained that we couldn't find a house.
The realtors took advantage of that to bring about a white flight, but the neighbors in this neighborhood said, oh, you're not going to do that. So they stopped it. And they made a decision then that anybody who lived in this neighborhood would be welcome, and that the integration of this neighborhood would be successful.
It was a changing neighborhood because it changed me.
Your crime rate will go up. The property values will go down, the crime rate will go up, you'll just, all these problems were supposed to happen and they didn't.
When I moved to Riddell Avenue, there was only one black family on my block. At first, my husband and I, we was a little leery.
I think it was the character of the people who lived in this neighborhood. I also think they had a vested interest in this neighborhood. Some of them had been here for 3 and 4 generations. I think also, no, I don't think. I also know that there were some people in this neighborhood with a very strong moral fiber to do what was right.
I was on the corner, so I was sort of the first house in the second block, and so people would come in and turn, and if it was a white relative with a white family, we'd entertain them, what we'd have them for dinner. Relative with a black family, we'd entertain them and have them for dinner, just so they would feel welcome, because hospitality is such a critical piece of it.
My parents moved here in 1968. They had been here for a long time. And of course, I was raised here, my sister and my brother. I can say I enjoyed my childhood, and my childhood experience here is what I want to pass on to my children. What I like about it is the pride the neighbors took about their homes, their yards. That excites me, and I pass it on to my boys.
I mean, we had a wonderful childhood. I mean, you had kids out on the streets all the time playing. We all went to school together. We carpooled to school together. And so we learned early on that your friends make a difference. And it didn't make a difference what color they were. And this neighborhood meant something very special that we wanted to keep and preserve and grow up in and have our kids grow into it.
We had a very diverse mix of professionals in the neighborhood. We had salesmen, we had accountants, we had lawyers, we had doctors. There was a skill set in my parents' generation that lived here that were able to put things together and get things done.
Harold Marsh, who's African American, was one of the leading civil rights lawyers in the country.
He decided to contact all of the black neighbors that had moved in and let them know that they were going to start an organization called the Caroline Civic Association, and asked if they would like to be members. And most of them said yes.
As you were working to build something, and what we were building was to say we can live in a different way. We can live and say good neighbors come in all colors. So we had started Arts in the Park as a way of advertising our neighborhood and saying this is who we are.
And the first one was very, very successful. They raised a lot of money.
We get tens of thousands of people in 2 days into this park. We have fun. We have a dinner on Saturday night for volunteers. I think the Arts in the Park is really the glue that makes any position in this organization worthwhile.
As a kid, I went up and helped bang steaks for Arts in the Park. Now, I may not have been very helpful, but we did it. There are other people in the neighborhood who grew up here, and they're just part of that core people that make sure things happen.
we kind of have created a little duplicate of the way we want our community to be seen in Arts in the Park. The process for giving back, we do a lot of different things. It's not just going out and finding a charity and handing them a check. We actually open it up for grant recommendations from the neighborhood. We try to help those organizations that our community is involved in.
We all came up here to what was beautiful new homes, wonderful parks and neighborhoods. For those of us who came from the lower West End, we had all played in Maymount Park. The pride that my parents felt in the community was clear to us as they worked on voter mobilization. And it was kind of a footnote until much later in my life that I realized what was going on and how impactful it was to this community and how special it was.
The kids had rich lives growing up, not only because there were lots of things in the city for them to do, but there were lots of opportunities for them to do them with all kinds of people.
I like what I see in my neighborhood when I go in and out about every day, just, walking through my neighborhood, just meeting people. The interest in this neighborhood is so great.
When we do events in the neighborhood or parties or something's going on people needed to know about, the internet was not as fully capable as it is now. We could go door to door taking flyers, the old-fashioned way. 350 residents got those flyers. So what we did was we decided that, okay, there's got to be an easier way. What if we had one person to cover 2 to 4 blocks on their street?
Every block had a block captain, and the block captain would be like the chairman of your block. The responsibility of the block captain was to come to the meetings for the organization. The block captain would be the one to pass the message along to everybody in your block.
And we were lucky, very lucky, to have a nucleus of people who started the Civic Association who were very intelligent, very democratic minded. I'm not talking politics, I'm just talking about, for the good of all. And we did have a very rich offering of other groups for people to participate in.
To me, it was all just normal because it was, my parents' generation that put it all together. It was later in life that I really learned a lot of what they did as adults too.
It's about at the halfway point, and I don't want to keep you any longer. But we are sharing this film, part of it tonight, part again March 15th at our third Tuesday meeting. And then there is going to be a huge event, more than likely at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, if we can barter that deal, April 28th and 29th. As we have not only the people that you see in the film talking about the Carroll Lawn community, but also the filmmakers and people from other parts of the country that have done similar things as far as neighborhoods intentionally deciding how they want to be designed, and in that design wanting to be able to confront the challenges that we've had in the past in history. So thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed being with you today. I'm hoping that even with the technical glitches that you got something out of this, because I certainly enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
I think we can all say that this was very enlightening, and we wanted to come back and show the rest of the film and maybe others that they have started. Our next Focus Club event will be March 15th here in Fellowship Hall, and it's going to be on education. I think we're all interested in what is happening in the educational system. Mickey Ogburn, who is the 3 Trop District board member, which is our district, and Katie McDermott, Wen Kuntz's niece, And she is a professor and chair of the Department of Education and Public Policy at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And they are going to be speaking on education. Ms. Ogburn on what's happening in the local schools here in Henrico, and Dr. Dr. Dermott will talk about what is happening nationally with education. And I think all of us have grandchildren or possibly great-grandchildren. They're in the educational systems right now, and we'll find this one very interesting. So I thank you for coming, and we'll see you on March 15th.